think by now the Oscar-nominated list will be out online. I want to go back in time, take a time machine, and go back to a film that was nominated for a lot of them, but lost all of them. Yep. And I think we should talk about the Shawshank Redemption.
They send you here for life. That's exactly what they take.
I'm Mr. Norton, the warden. I believe in two things: discipline and the Bible.
This film, I haven't seen it in so long. Matter of fact, when it came out, Forrest Gump was the biggest movie of that year, right?
Right.
And my mom and my stepdad, they went to the Blockbuster Video. They had an option to rent that Shawshank Redemption and to rent Forrest Gump. They picked Forrest Gump. Reason being, they didn't want to see any prison stuff. My mom hates prison stuff. She hates prison stories. Yet she loves life. Okay.
That's all I can think about watching this movie, by the way.
Yes, but without the jokes. And I gotta say, it's a shame this film didn't win anything, because this film was really good, based off of Stephen King's book.
Shawshank Redemption is one of the biggest Oscar snuff movies ever. It was nominated for 7. It was like the biggest movie at the time, except there was like another tsunami coming at the exact same time, and that tsunami was Forrest Gump. And Forrest Gump swept the Oscars. Shawshank Redemption got nothing. Huge snub. So I'm pretty sure that now the Oscar list is out. Everybody's got their own version of 2023 snubs, but this is one of the biggest ones ever. And we were just going through the list of all the things it was nominated for, and I gotta say, like, I can't say I really disagree with them on this. Like, Forrest Gump really is a truly incredible movie. So, like, it lost Best Picture, Leading Actor, Adapted Screenplay, Film Editing, Cinematography, Film Score, Sound Mixing. Like, goddamn, you know what I'm saying? like,
it was also nominated for Golden Globes, and it didn't win either.
Yep.
It went, and Screen Actors Guild and Writers Guild.
And I can feel a very similar tsunami coming right now this year, which is going to shut the door on a lot of really big movies. We were just talking about American Fiction. I don't know if American Fiction can win anything in a field where Martin Scorsese and Killers of the Flower Moon hold all the cards. It's interesting you mentioned Blockbuster too, because this is strangely one of the movies that put Blockbuster on the map, because this was at the time the most rented movie ever. It like changed the game for video on demand.
It stars Tim Robbins, and my first like real induction to Tim Robbins was Nothing to Lose with Martin Lawrence. Okay,
yeah, that's cool.
One of the funniest films ever. That was 3 years after this film came out, and he is a big shot banker, investor guy. He is found out that his wife has been cheating on him. He followed his wife to the lover's house, and he's just in the car with some bullets in his hand.
Drunk as hell.
And he's like, I'm gonna kill this.
He loaded that thing too.
In cut Silk Sonic. This bitch got me paying a you know, and he is serving 2 life sentences in Shawshank Redemption Correctional Facility.
Right. And the movie leaves it deliciously vague as to whether or not he actually killed these people.
And that also is very convenient, isn't it, Mr. Dufresne?
Since I am innocent of this crime, sir, I find it decidedly inconvenient that the gun was never found.
So, yeah, he is absolutely screwed. And you mentioned earlier that this is a Stephen King story. It's based off of a short story called Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. This is one of the reasons why I've always been such a great Stephen King fan. I'm a really big Stephen King fan. He's known for horror, but most of his books are not horror. He writes a lot of other things, like a lot. And this is more of a drama, but his horror background makes this absolutely horrific. And obviously Shawshank, or the Shank is what they call it in the books sometimes, is a constant setting for his books. It always reminded me of like not Rikers Island, although I guess a little bit. But what's the one in San Francisco?
Alcatraz.
Alcatraz. Yeah, it's exactly right. Where it's just the place just has a bad vibe, man. It's just got a bad vibe. It really does look like hell. And, I mean, it
Bro,
looks
like a
hell.
medieval castle.
Yeah. Which brings in another really interesting element into this film, which is religion. The warden of the Shank is a deeply religious man. He's like, I'm gonna tell you the rules. The rules are,
don't you dare use the Lord's name in vain in my prison.
Right. And other than that, you'll figure out the rest. And someone's like, well, what time do we eat? And he was like,
See, if that was me, my smart ass, when the guy, what's his name?
Clancy Brown.
Clancy Brown.
One of my favorite actors. I follow him to any movie.
He gut checked him, blah blah, and he's like, "You would eat it at the time when we tell you, you maggot, blah 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 blah." And I would have been like, "So when is it?"
It's like, so like
what's the time?
Or like, yeah, for real.
No, brother, hungry.
That's really funny. He just looks like he enjoys this shit. The movie starts with one of the people being killed by Clancy Brown. It's his first day at the prison, and they're all goading someone to make some noise. And Red, which of course is played by the incredible Morgan Freeman, he's like, I got 2 packs of cigarettes that says Andy's gonna scream first. And Andy does not make a peep. But someone else does. He starts crying, and Clancy Brown literally beats him to death.
Son of a bitch.
Like, what a hell of an introduction.
By the way, the whole film is narrated by Morgan Freeman, man.
His voice is like perfect. Like at this time, mwah.
He just on that mic talking about,
when I saw Andy, I didn't think too much of him.
I must admit I didn't think much of Andy the first time I laid eyes on him. Looked like a stiff breeze would blow him over.
There's a guy that's on the yard that tries Andy several times. Andy goes to Red for the first time and talk to him, and he says, Red, I hear you the guy that can get different things, get anything in here. And he's like, what you need? And he's like, a small rock chisel,
rock hammer.
You know? But he's able to get it to him, and the film does it in a really cool way to show you how their transfer system happens to where, you know, a inmate can get something from the outside and bring it on the inside.
And that segment is really cool because there's no words. They explain this all to you through camera shots, right? They show people unloading a truck full of laundry, and then the camera, an unmotivated camera move, which makes you say, why are we moving? The camera pans down to one load. It's like, look at this, and then it cuts, and then we see some guys processing some laundry, and the camera drifts back down to that load, and it's like, oh, okay, so now it's here. I like the non-verbal communication. I also think this is a good time to point out that Morgan Freeman was nominated for Best Actor in a Leading Role. Leading. Meaning, and it's so obvious when you watch the film, Andy is not the main character, and we really never get to know a lot about Andy or his like interior thoughts. Andy's always kept at a distance, and he even said that his wife calls him a closed book, that he was just always hard to read. Yet Red, we get Red's thoughts constantly because he's the narrator. So for a movie that I've seen a lot, because this is a movie that has been on TNT a lot. When I think of TNT, I think of the freaking Shawshank Redemption. So for a movie that I've seen so often, I actually strangely forgot that Andy is not the main character, and it's Red.
Every time you see Red, and when his parole hearing is coming up, he's like, oh, yes. They asked him, said, have you been rehabilitated? And he's like, oh, yes, I believe I'm not a threat to society, and I'm pretty good, sir. I'm good. I am a changed man. Rejected. They wanted to tell you that, you know, you get into these type of situations, it ain't easy. It ain't easy getting out or go or staying in there, because later in the film, there's a character in there by the name of Brooks. You know, he's been in there for 50 years. Right. And something very sad happens with Brooks, even though you would think it's something that's beautiful because he gets parole. Red says, the man has been institutionalized. So getting out into the real world, he doesn't know what's going on.
Right. You know? You said it's not easy. And the reality is, it's not just not easy, it's literally impossible. this is not a correctional facility, just like no prison is a correctional facility. That does not exist in the United States. It's much more of a punishment facility. And that is it. They don't really give a damn whether or not you are corrected, whether or not you're actually a threat to society. It's about punishment. And that's really what our system is about. And that is the subtext of this film. The prison industrial system is broken. It is busted. And this movie even goes a step that I did not remember it took. Now, a lot of people talk about the prison industrial system being a system built for modern day slavery. And this movie more or less says, yeah. And the warden is absolutely thrilled by that. He's using his unpaid source of labor to have people build roads, to help him rub shoulders with the governor and become a very powerful, very rich man.
This keeps up, you're gonna put me out of business.
Ed.
This pool of slave labor you got, you can underbid any contractor in town.
All the while, he's doing some not so legal things as well.
Yeah,
and he is equally as guilty, if not more guilty, than all the inmates. And yet, he's the warden. And that is a fascinating and downright terrifying situation. Again, Stephen King uses his horror background to like full capacity. The not so secret about prison wardens in the real world too is that they're really just slave owners. They're overseers. It's really like Candyland from Django Unchained. Like it's a bad situation. And this guy, because he is so deeply religious, at first you might think, oh, okay, so maybe he's got some sort of a moral stance on something. No, he uses that book, the Bible, more like a shield and like a club instead of like his salvation. I think that makes the warden a really fascinating villain.
A scene comes along where they get selected to work on this roof, but they hear, Clancy Brown character up there talking about the tax situations and stuff that he's having problems with. And then, he's listening and he's like, I can help with this situation.
When he does it, it actually looks like he's committing suicide, to be honest with you. It looks like he's trying to get himself killed and thrown off the roof. But instead, we learn he's got a much bigger plan. And one of the really interesting things about watching the movie after having seen it so many times is this movie implores a very interesting sleight of hand, right? First of all, you think Andy's the main character. He's not. It's Red, right? It's a sleight of hand. I kept waiting for the movie to present us with a central problem. And bizarrely, it does not. The movie goes a long time without a central problem, I guess, other than will Andy be okay? Because it feels like he doesn't really belong there either. And you're like, I sure hope he'll be okay. I sure hope. Because the movie's already told you he ain't getting out. He's got a double life sentence. He ain't getting out. This is not an option. And so the movie has no central problem, and yet it chugs along. I shouldn't say chug, but it moves along just fine. And while it does that, it distracts you from the fact that it has no central problem with all these little small things. Like I said, with the movie explaining how Red sneaks things into the prison through a sleight of hand, right? They keep hinting at that big twist at the end by showing the warden he's got a safe on his wall, but he's hidden it behind a picture. And so he's like, the movie's like, people can hide things behind posters. People can hide things behind posters and picture frames. Anyway, so I like that interesting sleight of hand. Yeah, I like how it does that. So actually, the main plot is actually slowly sneaking over here, right? But you're too focused on the drama of, will Andy be okay? As you said, and I appreciate you being nice about it, that Andy is being harassed. That's actually not the case. It's a little bit more than harassment. Andy's being raped. He's being raped quite regularly in the prison. And what's interesting is like the things that he uses to defend himself. And this movie, I feel like, has like, I talked about like underlying themes of religion. This movie also has like, the movie has a movie theme where everyone around the prison, they all get together, including all our heroes, all our villains, to watch movies. And of course, he wants a Rita Hayworth, an actress, poster on his wall. And when he's getting attacked in the prison, he fights them back with a film reel,
Film, yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. And again, I always like movies that like movies. And I think that's like a fun little wink, wink, nudge, nudge, you know.
Right after that moment, we see Clancy Brown's character. He beat the hell out of him. He beat the hell out of him, like really, really bad, to where he couldn't walk anymore. And he had to be transferred to another facility.
And they kind of insinuated that Clancy Brown beat him so hard because Andy actually helped him with his financial situation.
And every time a shipment of people come in, they hug that horn.
Right.
And there's a gentleman on this who's like this young cat dude who's in jail for theft and everything.
And he's been in and out of a bunch of prisons.
And by this time, Andy is not only doing taxes for a lot of the correctional officers in there, the warden. He's doing all the warden stuff. He's shining his shoes and all that. So this young guy barely didn't even know how to read. So he's like, you know, I want to do better with myself. And it seems like you're the guy that can help me. Help me pass this freaking test that he needed to take. But this guy also served time with somebody before in another prison. And that somebody that he served in prison, which was a turning point, the aha, was the actual guy that killed his wife and the lover.
And what makes it interesting is he is actually a very untrustworthy type of guy here. And so there is this like little kernel where you're like, is this true or isn't this true? Yeah. Right? Because he doesn't have any motivation to lie, but maybe he's not, maybe he's impulsive, who knows, you know? And so the warden uses that and he's like, oh, you actually believe him? You know, like this guy who's a liar, he probably heard your story from somebody else and he's just using that to turn the screws on you. You gotta know better than that, dude. And at that point, you're like,
You're trying to keep Andy there to make sure he does all your legal booking,
and you know? So that he doesn't squeal, because the warden is doing some illegal shit, and Andy has been covering it up, putting all of the warden's money, hiding it under an alias so that no one can take it. And if anyone were to ever find out about that, I mean, the warden is going to be in a jumpsuit. So the warden is like, this guy cannot stay here. The corruption of Shawshank is absolute, and there's really no escaping it. Even if you truly are innocent, the warden doesn't give a damn, especially if he needs you, and he does need you. And even if Andy wasn't taking care of all the books, he needs some slave labor. Okay, he can't be having the slaves run out and shit.
If that truth came out, everything is gone.
Andy goes to the hole for a month, and then you know what? Fuck it. Throw another month on top. And it is heavily implied that Andy might have lost his mind in there. Because he starts talking about freedom. He starts talking about a word that you mentioned earlier, hope. And Red is like, you need to
no hope in here.
Stop talking like that, because that will get you killed. Hope will get you killed. Not just physically killed, but like psychologically, mentally killed. So he's like, don't come in here talking about hope, because not only is that bad for you, is what he says out loud, but we all know the subtext is it's bad for him, because he fears that if he starts getting hope again, it might drive him insane. And that is just so sad. And it also makes it more meaningful, and this is why it was beautifully written, and so I totally understand the Oscar nomination, because the last word in this film, spoken in this film, is hope. Red says, I have hope. And that's where the movie ends. And when he said that, I was like, oh, shit. It was like, hit me. I was like, I feel it, boy. I feel it.
When he tells Red, he's like, you know, there's a certain spot where me and my wife got married. I want you to go up there, look under this special rock over there, because if you get out on parole, I left you something and I think you're going to have it. So he's basically like, what is Alan about to do? Because he just gave me something like a suicide mission or something like that.
And it's like, how could you leave a rock under a tree for me before you got here? Like, what the hell are you talking about? And so Red goes back to his friend and he's like, yo, I'm worried. Like, I don't think Andy is okay. Because he learned that Andy got a piece of rope smuggled into his room. And so he's like, that night was the longest night of my whole life. And when he said that, you think about what his life must have been, because he spent his whole life in prison.
If me and you was doing the bid and you took some rope, I've been up all night, be like, Devin, I hope you're still in there in the morning, bro. Come on, bro.
Let it be known and put this on the record. If I ever show up and they say it was a suicide, boy, I was framed. All right, go find him. Go find him. All right,
go find him.
I ain't gonna kill myself. All right, no sir. I got framed. All right, so let that be known. The way that it's set up, it's heavily implied that Andy hung himself in the prison, and they come out for roll call, and he's the only one that's not there. And instead of the movie just cutting to the empty cell, it cuts to Red, and Red is looking just nervous. Worried. And he's like, and his expression says like, we all know what just happened. Andy hung himself. And then the camera cuts to a prison guard, and again, we don't see the inside of the cell yet. And the prison guard walks up, and the prison guard's expression is like, you! And you're like, oh no, Andy really did hang himself.
Oh my holy God.
And you're like, my God, what the hell? But it's much weirder than that because this is a Stephen King story. Andy is missing. He's gone. He's freaking vanished. And the warden's like, yo, he was here last night. He should be here today. How could you lose him?
And so the warden is freaking mad. He picks up some rocks and stuff that's on the windowsill that he was actually, molding and stuff.
It's implied that this is what he bought. That he bought the rock hammer for.
So he's throwing at all the guards and stuff like that. He's throwing at all these, and he's freaking upset. And he's like,
one big damn conspiracy, and everyone's in on it, including her.
He's like, what the hell? Stick his hand all the way through, pulls the dang poster down, and it's a big old hole in the wall. And then it just goes to the backstory of what he did. He used the rope to tie everything that he had, all the important papers that he switched out from the warden, of all the real papers and stuff, and some fresh clothes. He took the warden's shoes, replaced the warden's shoes that he was shining and everything. And he's like, all right. I put all this in the bag and I'm gonna tunnel through. He crawled through 500 yards of shit and feces.
Right.
And
that's about 5 football lengths.
Right. It's raining, it's pouring, and he falls from shit into what I assume to be fresh water. And so he is essentially baptized, right? And of course, with his hands up and the way the angle is shot, he looks like Christ. He looks like Jesus. And he is redeemed, and he is quite literally reborn. And in the movie, doubles back on itself, and it shows you scenes you've already seen, except now it shows you the sleight of hand that it was doing. It's like, while he was fixing the papers, he actually swapped them later. And yes, he did set up a secret identity to hide the warden's businesses, but actually he did that for himself. This was the longest con ever. And Andy said something really important earlier. He says, when I was out in the free world, I was a pretty straight and narrow guy. I'd never broke any laws. I had to come to prison to learn how to become a crook. And it's like,
yeah, that was cold. Message. Red gets out of there, and he has the same job that Brooks had, but he didn't turn to what Brooks did. He actually developed that hope.
Right.
And he went to that tree that Alan told him to go to. Alan had a note in there, and it said, I need help on my new journey out here in Mexico. Come on out here, basically.
Right.
And he came out there, saw his friend. End credits. Amazing.
Do you think this is a better movie than Forrest Gump?
Yes, I do.
You think this is better than Forrest Gump? Now, I really enjoyed Forrest Gump, and my gut instinct is to agree with you. This movie is beautiful, and there's a really great shot later in the film where Red is sitting down and Andy is standing up. If I got that right, unless I got it backwards. Yeah, I'm pretty sure Red is sitting down, Andy's standing up. It's right after Andy comes out of his 2 months in the hole, and there's this great shadow that's like cutting in between them. It's like slanting in between them to show that they're just like on different planets. They're not even thinking. They're not in sync anymore.
Andy was sitting down.
Okay, yeah. I just like the divide where one person's in the shadow and one person's in the light.
I think that this film should have won personally for screenplay, the writing and the editing.
Right.
Those 2 awards should have went to this.
And I like to think of this movie as like a cautionary tale for people being like, "Oh, this movie should get nominated. This movie should get nominated." When you've got 2 really good movies in a year, only one person can win. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the other movie wasn't equally as good or just as deserving. It's a political thing. It's not necessarily a skill issue when it comes to the Oscars. So whether or not your favorite movie actually wins or gets nominated or not really depends on whether or not the cast and crew have connections in Hollywood, not so much as to whether or not the movie's actually good. And I think this movie is important in that it shows that prison is, at least American prison, has always been this way. Okay, this is not something new. This is not some phenomenon, and this is not some sort of a woke conspiracy or whatever bullshit. No, prison has always been really bad. American prison.
They ain't correcting shit.
No, and they're not interested. There's no help. There's no one's even attempting to help these people correct anything. It was the inmates through Andy who asked for more books. It was the inmates who asked for a library. And when that young inmate needed to figure out how to get his GED and pass this test, the guards weren't helping him, right? There's no program to help him. It was the inmates coming together and making a ramshackle, effed up family that helped him. There are some movies that are classics because they might have been good at the time, but this one is just a good movie. It is a true, genuine classic, and it deserves to be such.
Now, we love this film, but what do you think about this film? Get in the comments and let us know what you thought about the Shawshank Redemption, because, you know, it is really one that is, you know, one of the best films of all time.
There's something inside that they can't get to that's yours.
What are you talking about?
Hope.
Thank you so much for clicking on this video. Also, get in the comments and what you think about the list, the Oscar list that came out. You know, what was your favorite films of 2023? Who you think is going to win out of that list? Along with those comments, please, if you're new to seeing our faces, hit that subscribe button right at the bottom. It's right there. It's red or black or blue or all below.
I think it's gray these days, or
it's gray these days and white.
Click it, whatever color it is.
And if you did like this video, please hit that thumbs up. It really does help out the channel. Or you can hit that thumbs down, whichever you choose. It is your opinion, but just remember one thing: it is mostly wrong. See you in another video. Do not go to prison. Stay good in, you know, real world.